Welcome back to Soulful and Sober. I'm so excited for my guest today, Allie Clark. She is a mom. She used to be a teacher and she now is a sober coach. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. We were chatting before and I'm like, okay, we should just record because we could just talk, I feel like, for hours.
Seriously. It's already been so nice. I'm like, oh, this just feels like I'm talking to an old friend.
I know, I know. I love having people on my podcast because I just feel like it's always so like aligned and it's so much fun. But I always like to kind of get back to people's stories. And obviously, when you decided to stop drinking or remove alcohol, it wasn't like, gee, I'm going to be a sober coach, right? None of us know
No.
what we're going to do. And I think this is where the magic lies is that we're all, and this is my belief, is that we're led on this path for a reason. We don't know what that reason is. And obviously, there's always pain in our stories. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to remove alcohol if it's like helping them. So we definitely have pain, but I always turn things around and say, like, we're meant to go on this journey for a reason. And I can't tell people what that reason is, but only you will find out as you go through it. So let's kind of dive into what made you want to stop drinking.
Well, you know what? My husband actually had an intervention with me. And it's so interesting because I've told my story a number of times. And first of all, I really like to tell my story because I feel like each time I tell it, I connect more dots. And I'm like, oh, well, this makes more sense. And I forgive myself a little more each time. I did hit a pretty low bottom that I ended up in medical detox. I ended up in rehab and I'll get there. But it was essentially forced. If I didn't stop drinking, and I loved Xanax as well. So for me, it was both wine and Xanax, which is a very scary combination. If I didn't stop, my husband said he was going to take our kids and leave. So that was his firm line in the sand. And thankfully, I was done. I mean, I was unbelievably miserable and I was almost relieved because I knew something had to give. So
Yeah.
that was essentially my final, but when did I really want to stop? Months before that. Um, I I always thought that I drank to relieve the stress of motherhood. A lot of my drinking happened once I became a mom, but I actually drank to relieve the stress of my childhood. And I didn't make that connection until I was 2.5 years sober, which is wild to me. So the story, I feel like, the story comes in pieces. And when you're ready and when the information kind of shows up and you go, oh, okay. And I'd actually started my recovery journey in AA after rehab. And I told my story a lot through birthday meetings and to my sponsor and just in regular meetings. And after one of the meetings, my friend came up and he said, Allie, I know that you should be here. I know that you drank a lot and used Xanax, but I didn't understand your drinking until today. And I said, oh, well, what do you mean? And he said, I just didn't know that you had PTSD. And I was like, I didn't say I have PTSD. He said, no, I know you didn't. Do you not? I said, I do not have PTSD. He goes, well, I think you actually might from the way you shared today in this meeting. You said talking about certain things of your childhood, you feel like something bad will happen if you talk about it, or you're going to get in trouble. It's like, you're a grown adult. That sounds like trauma.
Mm.
Like, okay. And thankfully, one, I really trusted this friend, but two, I was curious. He gave me the name of a trauma therapist that he really trusted and liked. And he's like, just check her out. So I filled out the intake form, set up an appointment. And after the first appointment, good news, I don't have PTSD. I have complex PTSD. I was like,
Oh no.
what?
I've never heard of complex PTSD before. It's interesting.
Right? Well, neither had I back then. And I feel like a lot of people don't know about it. And it was interesting. You and I were talking before we got on and started recording that um, you work with some veterans. And so when you
Mhm.
look at PTSD, I'm just thinking about the Vietnam War, that I heard about PTSD in the Vietnam War all the time. It was that trauma of the war. Those soldiers came back and really struggled with PTSD, debilitating. Complex PTSD is not, there's no definitive beginning and end to the trauma. It's continuous. And so you end up in fight or flight mode all the time, and your nervous system gets really out of whack. It is totally awful and miserable. And what's crazy, so I ended up seeing this therapist for 3 years. And I was 2.5 years sober. I did 3 different kinds of therapy with her. I did internal family systems
Mhm.
and cognitive behavioral therapy and somatic experiencing. And she and I were able to unpack the trauma and safely access the grief that I had never felt without setting off my internal alarm system. And there has just been so much healing. So I actually work a program of recovery for drugs and alcohol, and then I work one for trauma too. So it's like, well, what trauma? What happened, right? Well, in my childhood, from the outside looking in, it looked great. It looked fine. We appeared to be, your normal family. In fact, like a great little family. But behind closed doors was a different story. There were these unspoken rules, and I don't think they're that uncommon. I feel like a lot of people can probably relate. We did not talk about things. We shoved them under the rug. So no real emotional availability from my parents. And we did not air our dirty laundry. That was a big no-no. So right now, I am breaking generational patterns here by sharing so openly about maybe some not so awesome parts of my past. And it feels really good. And are you familiar with parts work, the internal family systems?
I am, and Gabby Bernstein actually talks a lot about it. Her book, one of her books is actually, and she obviously is not a therapist, and she gives that full disclaimer, but she loves it. She did it herself because she had a lot of trauma.
It is amazing. And so I still have parts of me that are like, we shouldn't be saying anything. So right before this podcast, I went for a walk and I dropped those parts off at the park. I'm like, you go play. Let me lead from self energy and let me share the story, because it's okay today to tell the truth and talk about things. And so I still really have to work on not having my nervous system get overly activated. So I also use cold exposure to help.
Oh.
And so I got parts at the park, and then I have this crystal stemless wine glass, and I just have sparkling water in there and I hold it, and it's very grounding and it feels really good. So I have to do this full nervous system thing on a daily basis, but it's a million times easier than living dysregulated, right? So back to these rules, besides the don't air your dirty laundry, we also, it was really important to stay loyal to the family system and to protect the family's reputation. In fact, it was okay if we lied, in fact, it was encouraged. So, um, and then 2 more rules: you had to look good. So your
Mhm.
physical appearance, you needed to look really good. I think I started blow drying my hair in 4th grade, which is ridiculous, right?
That's crazy.
That's
Yes.
crazy. And I have naturally curly hair, like this poor 4th grader, with the
Oh my
round brush trying to
goodness.
do her thing. But it was really important to look good.
Mhm.
And the other piece of it was high achievement, right? You got to look good on paper too. So I was a straight A student, a really good kid. I didn't get in trouble. I was on student council, all the things.
Mhm.
So again, from the outside looking in, everything looked great. But behind closed doors, it was really different. And those rules stem from, see, and this is where my parts are like, oh my gosh, are you really going to do this? I'm like, we're really going to do this, you guys. It's okay. They stem from, you know, trauma and these generational patterns from my parents, but also, their families of origin. And probably before that, it didn't
Yep.
start with my
Oh, yeah.
parents.
Yep, it gets, yep,
Yeah.
like you said, you're breaking it, but yeah, it gets brought down from generation to generation. So true.
Yeah. And, between the two sides of the family, there was alcoholism. So these rules
Mhm.
really track with that. And there was workaholism. And the big one that was probably the toughest of all was narcissism. And if you're not familiar with narcissistic abuse, it's a doozy.
Mhm.
It's really I encourage anybody to look up narcissism and Google narcissistic abuse. It's really tough. It's emotional and psychological warfare. So that's, all of those patterns were being infiltrated into our system. And so I really didn't drink because I was a good girl. I did not want to get in trouble. I don't think I drank until I was a senior in high school. And the first time I drank, Chrissy, okay, I had a couple beers and I was a pretty serious kid, right? Like straight A student, all the things. I had those beers and I went from introvert to extrovert. And I'm like, this is incredible. This
Oh,
is so
yeah.
good. I love this. So, of course, I kept going and I blacked out and then I got sick. It was awful. And I'm like, oh, I do not like drinking. And I have great friends and they're like, no, no, you did it wrong. Right. I ended up mixing beer and Everclear, which was usually just terrible idea.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so bad. And then there
Oh.
were these rules, right? It was like, okay, you got to space the drinks more and eat enough and drink enough
Mhm.
water and all these things. And I learned. And again, high achiever, I did great. And I always made sure from that point on that when I drank, I didn't drink enough to get sick. That was kind of that threshold of, okay, this is fun and this is great. But if you hit that point, then that's
Yep,
not fun.
yep.
So that was kind of my role. And that carried me through the rest of high school, senior spring break. It carried me through the first 2 years of college. I went to St. Louis University and I was an education major and I joined a sorority. And in sororities, you play a lot of different ways, philanthropy and sisterhood and your chapter meetings, but also date nights and formals and things. And it's binge drinking, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
really normal in college, right? And
Mhm.
I participated, but I had my rules, so nothing was too crazy or out of control. Well, things changed for me the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. We went on a family vacation to San Diego, and my mom fell on the beach in La Jolla. And when she went to get up, she couldn't get up. And they ended up having to call an ambulance. And long story short, she had broken her hip. She was 48 years old, and she
Oh.
ended right? I am 44 and I realize now, like, oh, that was so young. It was just
Mhm.
so young. So she had broken her hip because she had metastatic cancer. She ended up having kidney cancer that had already
Mm.
spread. So they had to air ambulance her from Kansas City, or sorry, from San Diego to Kansas City. And the rest of that summer, she was in the hospital. And I did go back to SLU. My parents were really big on education and wanted me to get my degree. And I said, okay. And I went back and forth every other weekend, which was really difficult. So I'd go home one weekend and I would do the metastatic cancer thing. And then I'd go back to SLU and try to do the, college sorority party scene. That was a really tough balance.
Yeah.
I mean, was hard. And
Mm.
the first big sorority formal, or I guess it was just a party called Presents that I went to, I didn't get sick. I drank a lot of tequila. I did not get sick. I cried. And I was so embarrassed because I cried and I couldn't stop crying. So my boyfriend and my roommate and her boyfriend, they had to take me home. And it was awful. I just could not stop crying. So we got back to my apartment and we're sitting on the steps outside. And my roommate's like, honey, what is it? And I just said, I don't think I should be here. I think my mom is too sick for me to be here. I feel really guilty going out and trying to have fun. And she's like, let's call your dad tomorrow. So I called him and I said, how long does she have? He's like, we hope 2 years. Okay. He's like, you don't need to worry about it. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I got to buckle down. I got to figure this out. How do I go home one weekend and party the next? Well, I did it. High achiever. I went to a sorority party right before Thanksgiving, and it was like I had fun. I didn't get sick. I didn't cry. It was awesome. I'm like, I figured it out. The next day, I was getting ready to go to my boyfriend's formal, and I got a call from my dad. He's like, hey, you got to come home. What? And he said, mom's back in the hospital and it's not good. And I just knew at that
Mm.
point. I'm like, oh my God. I go, what happened? And he's like, I'll tell you when you get home. I just want you to drive safely. I said, is this it? He goes, yeah, I think it is. This had been
Mm.
4 months, it wasn't the 2 years. I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was awful. So I sent my boyfriend onto the formal because I'm like, let me go figure out what's going on. And I got home to Kansas City. She was in a hospital, Menorah Medical Center in
Mm.
Kansas City. And I found out she had fluid in her lungs and they needed to drain the fluid. And so they gave her Demerol. And when they gave her Demerol, she coded. And she coded because she had so many opioids in her system, way more than were prescribed. So she was out long enough. They used naloxone to bring her back, and they had to give multiple rounds. And so it took a while, and she had a lot of brain damage from the lack of
Oh,
oxygen.
that's
So,
awful.
oh my God, I did not expect that when I got there. That was not the story I put in my head of what had happened. And so I thought, what in the world? Well, there was so much anoxia that they said she really can't go home once she's stable. She's going to need to go to a facility with 24/7 care. This is a level of care you guys cannot provide for her anymore. We're stunned. And they said, you can either let her go to a facility and, let her finish her days, months, however long she has there, or we can start a morphine drip and go ahead and let her pass peacefully. And that was a pretty easy decision for our family to make. What quality of life is there? You
Yeah.
know?
So, um, my mom didn't have cancer, but she had some issues with her heart, and she basically at work one day, my mom died at 50. She stopped breathing, and her lungs filled up with water, and she was out for so long that she was brain dead. And so I already knew my mom would not want to be in a facility. So we kept her on ice because we thought, like, I was young at the time. I didn't know anything. I thought that maybe that would help because the way they explained it, but it didn't, because she was just not breathing for too long. She was brain dead at that point. So yeah, we did. Obviously, she didn't have cancer, but we did something very similar. So it's a definitely, it's a hard decision to have to take somebody off life support.
I mean, shocking.
Hmm.
It was
Oh yeah,
crazy.
yeah. I had no clue either. I was driving home and my parents told me, and I was really upset, but I didn't know how bad she was until I got
Yeah.
there.
It's I mean, it really is shocking how in such a short period of time, your the life can change because of lack of oxygen to the brain. It's like,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh." Well, we ended up the decision we did agree best to really just let her pass
Yeah.
peacefully, and I'm so grateful we agreed to that. Okay, in the meantime, though, someone on her side of the family told the doctor that she believed that my dad was drugging my mom. Yeah, you know, little twist in the story, right? It's shocking when I still tell. I'm like, oh my gosh, that actually happened. So the doctor, they ran a tox screen, and there were questions. So the police got involved, and I got
Oh
questioned.
my
Yeah,
god.
and I said, I don't know. I was at school. I was in St. Louis. Chrissy, it was the wrong answer in my family system. Remember, we protect the reputation. We lie if we need to. And I
Yeah.
didn't react in that moment. I just responded naturally.
Well, yeah, and yeah, it was like probably like the gut instinct of like, no, why would you even question me? Like, that's crazy. Yeah.
Like, I wasn't here. Kind
Yeah.
of just got here. And what is happening? And I was stunned that my mom's life was ending very soon. Like, she was here. I mean, she could still talk and converse, but she wasn't the same. So
No.
that was on the horizon. But then also, here comes a whole nother, I don't even know what to call it. And I went into my amygdala. That to me felt life threatening, which that was, remember how I grew up. I was in fight or flight mode regularly. So my whole system is activated.
Mhm.
I ended up taking a break, moving away from the situation. And if another family member cornered me and said, wrong answer. You need to go fix that.
Oh my gosh.
They said, if this continues and the police really think something that your dad did this or whatever, He'll go to prison, which means you're going to take on your student loans. You need to get a job. You need to get health insurance. You have to figure out where you're going to live between semesters and in the summer. Who's going to walk you down the aisle? And your children will visit their grandfather in prison. And I'm like, what? Yeah, I can't process this. And I think that's the key point of trauma is it's too much, too fast, too soon. And that's exactly what that was, capital T trauma right there. So I did what I did really well, and that was to fawn. So fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Mhm.
Oh man, I am an expert fawner. So I complied, I people pleased, I kept the peace, and I went back to the doctor and said, there's nothing to see here. And everything moved forward. It got shut down. And I think we're to the doctor and the police were like, she's dying. Where is this going? My dad, over and over, I didn't do that. I don't know why she thinks that. I didn't do that. And he was really good about pain pills. He'd had surgeries, things like it didn't track. But the question remained of why did she have so many opioids in her system? I still don't have the official answer to that. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So the day after this, so I came home on a Saturday. On Sunday, friends and family came to say goodbye before they started the morphine drip, and everybody stood around her bed in the ICU, and we said goodbye. They started the morphine drip Sunday evening, and she passed Monday morning. And this happened in 36 hours from when, I
Wow.
get this phone call until she's gone. And I left the hospital. This was right before Thanksgiving, and we were thinking maybe we could have the funeral before Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way, but I left the hospital and went over to this shopping center, town center, to go get clothes for her wake and her funeral. I'm just a college sorority girl. I didn't really have appropriate clothes for my mother's funeral. So went to go get those. And I remember standing outside of Banana Republic being like, I don't get it. How are people still operating and moving on like it's a normal Monday? My mom just died. And being in this complete and total fog. And when I got home, it was probably 1:30 in the afternoon, and a family member handed me a glass of wine. And this is the moment that alcohol changed for me. I looked at my dad. I wasn't supposed to drink. I wasn't 21, right? We didn't drink at our home. And he just goes, it's fine. Like, okay. And I drank that glass of wine, and it was a relief I had never felt. It served a new purpose for me. And before that wine was gone, somebody refilled it. And I was like, oh, this is even better. And I just got this total relief. I ended up passing out because I'd been up for so long, and it didn't take much at that point for me to pass out anyway. The rest of that week, I did funeral planning in the morning. We'd either go to the cemetery or to the funeral home. And then in the afternoon, there was that wine again. And it was awesome. I am an introvert. And I do have to laugh. My son yesterday, my 17-year-old, said, I don't think that's a thing. I think it's a fancy way of saying you don't like somebody and you don't want to be with them. I just started laughing. I'm like, it is a thing, and I am totally an introvert. So we had people in and out of our house, that entire time. And I needed quiet and I needed downtime. And the only time I got that is when I went to my room right before I passed out. But Thanksgiving Day, we actually had some quiet. I was like, oh, thank God. Well, I thought we were going to get to stay home all day, and we didn't. The tradition was to go to my mom's side of the family. And that's what we did. And we went to the family member's house that said my dad killed my mom. And I remember saying to my dad, this does not make sense to me. Why would we go do that? If that's what she firmly believes and this is what she's done, why would we go have turkey together? He said, it's the right thing to do. We have people in from out of town and they've been helpful. So alcohol took on a whole new level that night. I got blackout drunk. That was probably the first time I'd gotten blackout drunk since the first time I ever drank. And I thought, there's the answer. It's like an invisibility cloak. I got to be there without being there. And it was such a relief. I really don't remember that night. So the next morning, I woke up. Of course, I'm so hungover. And we've got my mom's
Mhm.
wake that night. And we We had to go to the other side of the family for Thanksgiving. I looked at my daddy and I'm like, this cannot be for real. Like, this doesn't make sense to me that we would have a holiday on the same day. And he, again, it's the right thing to do. People are in from out of town. We're going. And so it's this continuous abandonment of myself and what I need to keep the peace. I mean, expert level. The difference between these two get togethers, though, we never had alcohol at on my dad's side of the family at get togethers. His father, so my grandfather, he insisted on lunch, no alcohol, because his father was an alcoholic. He totally could have been in the
Mm,
big book, like
okay.
crazy stuff. So we did this lunch, and then we went to the funeral home. We did the wake 4 hours. She was 48 years old. And when somebody's young and they die, a lot of people come. So we did the line for 4 full hours, and I was totally sober, and it was so hard. We totally screwed it up too. My dad was on one end, and he should have been the first person. Instead, he was the last person in the line would get choked up. And people are so uncomfortable anyway, and they say
Mm.
silly things. And we got a lot of really uncomfortable comments like, I didn't know she was so sick. What the heck happened? I didn't know how to answer that.
Es Especially there, like, that's not a place to ask that. That's,
It
like,
was so
inappropriate.
bad. It was so
Yeah.
inappropriate, right? And grown adults, like
Yeah,
my
like
friends'
yeah.
parents. I'm like, oh my God, I'll never forget that you
You're
said
like, "Well,
that
do
to
you
me.
do you have a minute? Let's go just leave and go, let me tell you what happened."
And I'm like, I kind of can't really tell you, right? Because I don't think you know the police got involved. Like, there's this whole secret to this. The other thing, people would be like, I thought I was better friends. Why didn't I get called to say goodbye to her? I'm like, what did you say? They're saying this as they're waiting to talk to my dad. But the worst one of all was when I had a couple people say, I heard you missed it because you were partying in St. Louis. And I said, no, 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 I was here. I was partying Friday night. They're like, why would you have been doing that? Why weren't you home? And I felt so much shame and just like a failure as a daughter. And I was so embarrassed. And I thought that's what people think of me, right? I was off having fun while my mom was sick. And it really touched that core fear why I left the sorority party in the first place. And I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave my body. I wanted to leave my mind. I wanted to leave the whole situation. I was stuck. So the next day we buried her. Great news though. After the funeral, everybody came back to our house and there was so much booze in the backyard. I'm like, this is how we do it. And I drank enough to pass out, came to, somebody handed me wine again. And it's that feeling of I'm stuck and I don't want to be here. Alcohol could take me out of that. It became this superpower for me. And I had no idea then that it was going to land me in detox and rehab. I didn't have any idea how addictive alcohol could be.
Mhm.
I didn't know how low it could take you. I mean, I had all these people around me saying, here, you need this. Nobody said to me, let's find a better tool. It just happened really organically. I managed to get through the rest of college, but it wasn't super fun to drink. I was always worried that I was either going to cry or I don't even know. I didn't trust myself under the influence. So I tried to go out and have fun and it wasn't really fun. It was the invisibility cloak. And I ended up student teaching my senior year, second semester. And that was great because then I just stopped going out during the week. Really
Yeah.
hard, really hard to be hung over when you
Yeah.
are
You have to do
teaching
all that. Yeah,
and with
exactly.
little kids. So it became
Yeah.
another guardrail or rule. And I moved back to Kansas City. I started dating Ben, who I ended up marrying. And I would say our drinking was just really normal at the time. We drank and it was just what we did with our peers. We went out and we went to bars and we played and we drank. And it seemed like no big deal. We got married in 2006. We got pregnant pretty quickly and I had a miscarriage. And I pulled that wine right out. It was like, oh, when there's loss, we drink. And I actually really quickly stopped the drinking because I thought, wait a second, if I want to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy, I don't think I should be drinking. I think I should be working on getting really physically well. So there was something inside me that knew deep down alcohol is not going to help with my health. And that came into play later. We ended up getting pregnant again, and I gave birth to my first son, Joe, on October 4th, 2008. Well, I gave birth to him in the same hospital that my mom died. So
Mhm.
everything I tried to shove under the rug, right? That's what we did. Everything we didn't talk about came right back to the surface when our family came into the room. I'm holding this new baby, and I have the worst emotional flashback I've ever had. My anxiety was through the roof. I was having panic attacks. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I thought, I guess this is what your body does after you have a baby. I didn't know. It
Mhm.
was complex PTSD symptoms. I didn't have the language, this is an emotional flashback. Um, Somebody brought champagne because of the baby. And so I drank a glass and then I was like, oh, that feels better. There's that relief. Well, we left the hospital, go home, and I'm really wanting to breastfeed my baby. And I'm struggling because my body is so freaking out of whack from this CPTSD. And I'm not willing to throw in the towel and try formula. And somebody said, you should drink a beer. It helps you relax and it helps with your milk supply. Like, say no more. So I started drinking a beer every night. And so for me, regular drinking started the like right when I became a mom. And my husband, being a gentleman, he's like, well, I don't want you to drink alone. So he would have a drink with me. And it was our victory lap. It was how we connected. It was just a really normal part of our marriage once we became parents. And we had no idea that it would end up being the third wheel in our marriage. We drank a lot after the first baby, not huge amounts, but regularly. And then I ended up getting pregnant again and gave birth to my daughter, Elizabeth, same hospital. So, same major CPTSD symptoms. And again, I'm thinking, I guess this is motherhood. I guess this is what happens after you have a baby. And this time it was even more complicated because of my relationship with my mother. We had a very complicated and complex relationship. And as I'm holding this little girl, I'm having memories come back and I don't want them to. I want to shove them under the rug and all of that. And so I'm working double time, trying to keep all of this down. So I doubled my alcohol. And
Mhm.
it didn't totally work, but it kind of did. And then guess what? I got pregnant again, had my third baby. And this time I was like, I know what it feels like to have a baby. I don't want to feel that way. And I convinced my husband to bring alcohol into the hospital. And we drank in the hospital. And I drank from the day he was born until I went to rehab every single day except for 2. So for almost 5 years straight, I was a daily drinker. And
Okay.
it went from, you know, I would say minimum
Mhm.
2 glasses of wine a night, but then it became 3. But because of this rule that I don't want to get sick, I really didn't go past that. And I ended up, all of these CPTSD symptoms were just constant. The alcohol wasn't working. I essentially had a mental breakdown, um, major emotional flashbacks and anxiety, panic attacks. Um, my inner critic was just so harsh,
Aw.
unbelievable, right? Intrusive thoughts, nightmares.
Mhm.
And it came to a head at Thanksgiving time, which makes sense. And I became suicidal. Suicidal ideation is very much a part of CPTSD when it's untreated. And so my husband was like, you got to get help. Like, I got to get help. So I went to see a psychiatrist and he's like, you have some really extreme symptoms. I want to get you on an SSRI, but I also want you to take Xanax to help while it's working. It takes time to get this medication to work. So I said, okay. And he gave me a prescription and I could take the Xanax 3 times a day, 1 milligram each. So I could take 3 milligrams a day. And he told me to do that for 2 straight months. And then to come back to him and we would see how I was feeling. And he promised, he said, you cannot get addicted. Not at that amount. Now, if you do this past 2 months, you might be able to. That is 100% not true. Xanax is highly addictive and it should not be taken with alcohol. And he said, just don't drink too much. To me, too much was throwing up. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
do that,
You're like,
right? I don't do that. I was like, okay.
yeah.
So I picked up those prescriptions. I took the SSRI. I took a Xanax and I drank a glass of wine and I was like, now this feels better. Oh my gosh. It really simmered those symptoms. And so for 2 months, I took 3 milligrams of Xanax a day. That's a lot of Xanax. I was like, I was gone.
Yeah.
At the end of the 2 months, he's like, I don't want you to take it 3 times a day, but you can take it every day still. You can't get addicted. I was already addicted. I
Yeah.
mean,
And your psychiatrist told you were not going to, so you're like, "I'm not gonna get addicted. I could totally do this."
yeah. And he said, you will probably have breakthrough anxiety. So when that happens, go ahead and just take a Xanax. And if you need a second one, that's okay too. Just don't take 3. I'm like, okay. He said, if you keep needing 2, we might just need to up the SSRI. Okay. So for 2.5 years, I had this strategy of when do I take the pill? How many pills a day do I take? When do I drink the wine? How do I mix it? Because if you get enough Xanax and alcohol on board, your nervous system gets so depressed that you shouldn't be driving anyway with those 2 things in your system. But
Yeah.
you know, you start to
Yeah.
talk really slowly, you slur your speech, your
Exactly.
motor is just so
Yeah.
slow. But what would happen is my whole system went down, and then when it wore off, my body had actually been trying to push the gas the entire time,
Yeah.
and as soon as it wore off, it was like we were full speed ahead
Yep.
with those symptoms, so I just needed more. That came to a head, um, in June of 2023. You know,
Okay.
in that time of using, of course, my life became unmanageable.
Yeah.
You can't drink alcohol and take Xanax every day and function at full
No.
capacity.
No.
It is impossible. And the longer I did it, the more I needed, the
Mhm.
less capable I was. And so we ended up going to Philadelphia for a family wedding. And people had been saying to me, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. People knew I had a problem and my behavior was really starting to show, and they were worried that something was going to happen at this wedding. And so I did not take a Xanax that day. That was the worst thing I could have done. My system was used to it, and
Hmm.
to not have it, not only did I end up having withdrawals that day, but the CPTSD symptoms were in full force, and the alcohol alone didn't work. I had to have the combination to get the relief. And so the whole day was a nightmare. I had one of the worst flashbacks, emotional flashbacks I'd
Mm.
ever had. And of course, it spilled into the wedding day, which was very hard for both of our families and very disappointing. It's like if I could go back and change it, I would, and I can't. But what I know today is, I had untreated complex PTSD and was deep in addiction. And that was, a terrifying combination. I shouldn't have been at the wedding. I should have been in treatment at that point. Um, we we ended up going on family vacation after that. We went to the Jersey Shore, and I knew it's like this is my last hurrah. This is it. I'm done. I can't keep doing
Mhm.
this. A friend of mine called, and she said that her mom died. And I was like, I'm so sorry. We're not going to be able to be there for the
Mhm.
funeral. We're out of town. And she said, I'm so glad she's dead. I hated her. She died of complications of alcoholism. And it had been decades, right? And there was
Aw.
so much trauma and pain in this relationship, and I thought that's going to be my kids if I keep doing this. They're going to hate me. And I had this new resolve, like, okay, I'm done. And so on our way back from Philadelphia to Kansas
Mhm.
City, we stopped in St. Louis to show the kids my campus. And it was showed them my apartment. And when I didn't sit on the stairs, but when I saw those stairs, everything came flooding back. All these trauma boxes that I had tried so desperately to close in my brain opened at the same time. And it was terrifying. I knew I couldn't keep using drugs and alcohol, and I didn't think I could face the trauma without drugs and alcohol. And I was at
Mhm.
this jumping off place, and I felt broken. I felt defective. I felt like something was so completely wrong with me, and I didn't know what it was. And I really believed that the world would be a better place without me. And so
Mm.
I went home and I crawled into bed and I tried to drink myself to death for like 5 days in a row. I was wildly unsuccessful, thank goodness. The one thing, I mean, I felt replaceable in every relationship in my life, except for my kids. I was like, if I die an alcoholic death, they will never have another mother. And this tiny bit of hope and will and drive for them is what gave me the courage to call my friend who is a social worker.
Mm.
I'd been hiding wine in my closet. My husband found that and he was so done with me and he's so done with my drinking, and he should have been. And he was too mad at that point to talk to me. And so I called my friend Susie, a social worker. She came over, she fed me, she bathed me, she put me to bed, and she told my husband she's got to go to medical detox. And we didn't know about it. We didn't know anybody who'd gone to detox. We didn't know anybody our age who had been to rehab or gotten sober. And so she started pointing us in the
Yeah.
right direction. And he ended up calling a friend of our family who was sober, and she connected him to a recovery consultant. And this consultant gave Ben two places, Shawnee Mission Medical Center or Cottonwood Springs. And she helped him set up, a line in the sand. And so he did. He said, if you take one more drink or pill, I'm going to take the kids and leave. And that was a really good line in the sand because one, our kids didn't need any more harm from my drinking and drug use, neither did my husband. But two, his seriousness in that line absolutely helped me say yes to help. I drove to Target while I was trying to ponder these choices. I tried desperately to taper. I was like, could you please just let me taper? I'll do this. And he's like, nope, you have to go to medical detox.
Yeah.
Okay. I drove by this place in Kansas City called First Call. And I knew of this place from an acquaintance, and they have a crisis line. And I called their crisis line. And do you know what they said to me?
Mm-mm.
They said, we are so glad you called. That is so hard to do. It's one of the hardest things to do is call and ask for help. We're so proud of you. Oh my God, who are you? Amazingly nice people.
Yeah.
And they said, the more honest you can be with us, the better direction we can point you in. So I told them everything. And they said, we think the best place for you is Cottonwood Springs. It was like, there's my answer. So I went to Cottonwood Springs. And when I got into medical detox, I found people who were going through exactly what I was going through. I realized I wasn't alone. It wasn't just me. And I started speaking a language with them that they understood, and I understood what they were saying. And it was such a relief. And when I was talking to them about how my husband wanted me to go to rehab, but there's no way I could do that. I have 3 kids. So many of the people there were like, you are so lucky. Like, what are you talking about? They said that they wish they could go to rehab. Either they didn't have health insurance and couldn't go, they had a job they couldn't leave, kids they couldn't leave, an unsupportive spouse, whatever it was. And I realized I was being handed this gift. And I remember calling my husband and saying, okay, I'll go. And so he got a bed for me in Colorado in Estes Park at a place called Harmony Foundation. It's now called Harmony Recovery. And when I left medical detox in Kansas City, he flew me to Denver. We drove to Estes Park. And I remember pulling up at Harmony and just feeling total relief. I knew it was going to be really hard for me to get sober with my 3 kids. It was summertime. And because my husband and I drank together every night, I just felt like I've got a chance by coming here. And I promised myself that I would give it my all, you know? Um, I had to go to medical detox in Colorado too. I was that sick.
Okay.
They had me go for 4 more days. I
Yeah.
mean, it was when you have, again, wine and Xanax, you guys, it's really bad. It's really, really risky business. And so I ended up in detox there for 4 more days. And then I got to be, a regular client. And when I became a regular client, I realized I'm in rehab. And I had a huge breakdown and I felt so ashamed and so guilty. And I felt so bad for leaving my kids. And the wonderful people that work there said, we are so proud of you. You've made such a good decision for yourself. Good moms go get the help that they need. This is the best thing that you could do for your kids. I'm blubbering. I'm like, okay.
Aw.
And they said, just give it your all. I'm like, okay. So I hit a place where everything really changed for me in rehab when they took us on a field trip. They took us up a mountain in this white van. Like, what
Yeah.
is happening here? And we get out of the white van. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? They're like, well, we want you to go on a little hike and look at the beauty. Like, this is so dumb. I can't believe I'm doing this. I get to the top of the mountain and I just started bawling. It was beautiful. And I realized I have missed so much because of my drinking. I have been
Yeah.
so gone. And I didn't want to miss anymore. I wanted to experience beauty and joy and have a life again. And this tech came and sat next to me and he didn't say a word.
Yeah.
Then he ended up saying, "Isn't it great?" After about 20 minutes, I go, "This is unbelievable." He goes, "If you stay sober, you get a lot of this." I'm like, "Really? Is it really that good?" He's like, "It's really that good." He was 8 years sober. He's like, "I
That's
promise."
amazing.
So I doubled down. I did my thing. I left rehab. I went to AA. I followed directions and I just promised myself it's not going to be easier to go back and use drugs and alcohol. It's only going to be harder. There's a lot of hard work ahead, but it's the easier path than going the other way. And so I
I
did
so agree. Mhm.
everything I could. I followed every direction they told me in AA. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. I was on the business committee. I led meetings. I did all of it. I changed my playgrounds, playmates, and playthings. But it was really when I did trauma therapy that I started to truly heal. It's
Yeah.
like I needed the drugs and alcohol out of my system, and I needed a really solid foundation of sobriety to
Yeah.
be able to tend to the trauma. But trauma healing is where I got just like skyrocketed into a really happy, healthy life. And I am so grateful. And this past year, I ended up, starting to look around at other sober communities. And I found Jen Hurst's Lighthouse Sobriety. And I had moved to online meetings thanks to the pandemic. It's an introvert's dream come true. I love Zoom. It's
No,
like
absolutely.
could just be at
Yeah.
home and have my meetings. And I had
Mhm.
moved to all women's meetings through AA. And Jen Hurst's program is online. It's all women. The meetings are recorded, which feels really safe. She's just got a lot of safety in her community, but also a lot of her habits that she uses go right along with my trauma recovery. So they gel. My trauma recovery and my recovery from drugs and alcohol gel really, really well with her program. There was starting to be some conflict between AA and my trauma recovery. A big part of AA is getting out of yourself. And I needed to get in myself. I left myself all the time. And so Lighthouse Sobriety is very much about being within yourself and doing what you need to do for you and not I don't have to abandon myself at all to be part of that community. And that's a really good thing because professional fauna here
Yes.
is
Yeah.
bad. So and it's through Lighthouse Sobriety that I found Lighthouse Academy, which is her sober coaching program. And that's when I stepped into coaching. And I had no idea that this really awful bottom would lead me to the place I am today and to be in a place where I can not only help other women, but recover out loud.
Yep. Yeah. And I love your story, and I think the trauma piece is so important. Um, when I wrote my book, the statistics for trauma and substance use are ridiculously high, very high. So it's, sadly, it's not uncommon, but if we don't know about it and
Yeah.
we don't talk about it, yeah, you're alone. And, um, and I think you definitely said something that stuck with me is that so many things from our childhood impact our adulthood. And I did not have complex PTSD. I had trauma, but not severe trauma, right? Not like big T trauma.
Yeah.
I had little T traumas, and a lot of them kind of came to light. And I still work on a lot of this stuff. It's not like I'm just like, cool, now I could just go like forget all my past and my whole life. But um, I think it's important because when we're not numbing, we're not running towards something. And I truly didn't believe I was numbing because I wasn't drinking all the time. I told myself, well, that doesn't make sense. But it's when you're doing the work rat race during the week to get to the end of the week, and I drink sometimes during the week too, but,
Yeah.
it's just so easy to not deal with things because you're always like you said, you're out of your body. You're not in your body ever. And so
No,
I think that's just something that really kind of resonates with me because I didn't think I had all these things wrong with me. Like I just didn't know. And I just believe alcohol blocks so much. And without awareness, how do we heal? How do we how do we do anything? We can't.
we can't.
No. And I love your story and thank you for
Oh,
being so
thank you.
honest about some of this because it's hard talking about these things.
Yeah,
But the more people I meet, our childhood has such an impact on us, and I think it's important that, um, we talk about it, and actually, I do know some people I should, give them I never think about the parts therapy, um,
oh,
but that's a good one because I do think, you know this, obviously doing it, but if you truly have trauma, get therapy, there's actually
mhm,
therapy specifically for trauma. So I'm not trained in trauma therapy, but yes, working at the VA, there is specific trauma therapies for certain PTSD things that you can work on, and it's very helpful because to me, and obviously I know we don't need to go into the rabbit hole but there's always these things like alcohol, you know, alcohol is a disease, right? And I'm not here to debate whether it is or isn't, but I'm like, well, PTSD is a disease, and then we drink to cope. So it's hard to
yeah,
know, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg, right?
totally.
And I don't have all the answers. I'm not like I said, I'm not here to debate anything, but we are taught that alcohol is used for so many coping mechanisms. And yeah, when we have a childhood past, we all have a childhood past. Some are worse
Yeah,
than others. But yeah, if we don't
right.
address those things, you're absolutely right as far as the the traumas, because you can talk to your kids about their emotions and not hide things and teach them a different way of
Yeah.
doing things, and I think that's so beautiful.
It is honestly such a relief, and here's the thing, I repeated the cycle and the patterns too. Alcoholism is in our family, and I ended up doing the exact same thing, and I promised myself I'm never gonna do that, right? I'm never gonna have these patterns that I felt were harmful growing up, and I repeated them too, and I'm working today to break them. That's my greater why, is to break these generational patterns for myself and for my kids, because if I stay in the patterns, I'm still sick and stuck, even without the alcohol and Xanax.
Mhm.
If I find other tools and create new patterns, that's where I'm healthy and free. And that's what I want for my life today, is to be healthy and free, and that's something I can pass to my kids. Even though unfortunately, they were 8, 6, and 4 when I went to treatment. They were in that and they were part of it, but I have more years than not
Yeah.
on the other side, and that makes me really hopeful. It's not too late. There's still a lot of time in, oh my gosh, internal family systems. It's really beautiful work. I've had a lot of success with that. And same with somatic experiencing, the trauma in my body. There's a lady on Instagram, the workout witch, and she has these amazing somatic exercises. And I just started those in March. I have had more relief in my nervous system than ever before. I mean, it's
Right.
just
You need to send me
amazing.
those. I love somatic stuff. I do, and I really like breath
Oh,
work a lot. I find,
yeah.
um now obviously, this not just, one modality, but, for me,
Yeah.
I can my thoughts create all these, emotions, and then I feel really kind of, out of I don't feel good, and so me, there's lots of different things I've had to work on, which we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now, but yeah, definitely send it. I think that's such a
I
good
will.
tool because I think having all these tools in our toolbox is important because there's sometimes it's not just one thing, it's
No.
all the things. But again, like I said, it's the awareness. And I think that's the beauty of removing alcohol is it seems scary at first, like that person said, it's going to get good. But it's
Yeah.
the only way in my mind to deal with the things that have been blocked, that have been suppressed. And I think it's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing you can teach your children. Let me tell you a story, right? And obviously, as they get older, you can, tell them more candid things. But like when my son gets, a tad bit older, I mean, he's 10, I know I can't tell somebody what to do, but I also can tell them, I want to explain to you, like, there's this thing, alcohol, and I didn't know this stuff when I was younger, and I thought this was normal. And we have obviously we have one, obviously, but we have a history of severe substance use in my family too. And
Okay.
whether or not people want to say that it's genetic or not, I think it's there.
Yeah.
And I do think we pass things down, not necessarily all that necessarily, but you know, I look at my childhood and there was things that probably happened that I wasn't even aware of because I was so little and it impacted me. I know we have to end here
Definitely.
soon, but like, I had a meditation with somebody who was a therapist and it was crazy. I was in my old house and saw my parents fighting. My dad had a very severe alcohol use disorder. He's sober. Um, and I was like in the house and my brother and I when we were little. This was like kindergarten maybe or younger. I mean, we moved when I was in 1st grade, and I had to do 1st grade twice. But anyways, I saw my parents fighting, and my mom looks at me and looks what you're doing to them. And as a child, we blame ourselves. It's not that
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, yeah, she's right. Look what he's doing to me." So I think there was a lot of things that happened to me that, like, that I had that vision, and I was like, wow. Like, it's just wild. So I think we are more impacted than we realize, but I also don't think we have to be a victim of our past, right? We can do the things
Right.
we need to do to work on it and be gentle and loving with ourselves too, because
Yeah.
we only know so much too, and we only have so many tools in our toolbox.
Exactly. I think back to when I was hitting bottom, it's like I didn't have the language. I didn't have the
Yep.
tools. I didn't have what I have now. I wish I did.
Yeah. And
I didn't.
100%. And I'm gonna wrap up because I know we've
Okay.
been on here for a while, and I could talk to you for, like, 2 hours, honestly. We're gonna have to
Oh,
do another one because I really feel like I wanna get more information.
oh, I would
I really
love
enjoyed this.
that.
Yeah, it was really good, and I think the trauma stuff is really important, for so
Yeah.
many listeners and people. Even if you think that you don't have severe trauma, I think especially women, especially women,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
also a fawner too. But, I would love to talk to you more, as well, because I think this conversation is great. Um,
Oh.
but where can people find you? We'll put all your information below so people can
Oh.
connect with you.
I am on Instagram. My handle is at Sober Dream Team. I've called my coaching business the Sober Dream Team. I really believe that it takes a team of people to get well. And when you have the right people on your team, you've got your dream team. I mean, the possibilities are limitless.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on and for your honesty and just sharing your story and just being here. It was such an honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.